Alright, Devilman Crybaby was great. It drew me in with its distinctive art style and then surprised me by actually having a story. More than that though, it had thematic depth. The show didn't stop at good action, no, it had something to say about social hysteria and people going down a path toward genocide. And then I got to the end of the show. And by the last episode, I wouldn't have believed that I was watching the same series if it hadn't maintained the art style, because the underlying ideas of the story slid away from everything that the show had previously established. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If I'm going to talk about the slide away from its foundation, I'll need to establish the themes that the show developed over the course of its run. I think the primary idea that the show deals with is the misidentification of evil through two means: oversimplified narratives and, simply being wrong. Now, the central way that Devilman deals with this idea is by fraying, blurring, and then snapping the line between devil and man. But this idea goes much deeper than that. Really, it's ingrained into the DNA of this show. So first things first, we need to talk about the show's demons. In stories that feature them, demons tend to be little more than a generic evil to throw at the protagonist. If there's anyone that we can know is a bad guy without having to establish any of the bad things that he's done, it's a demon. And while the show sticks to that depiction to a certain degree, it seems like one of the main goals of this show is to get us to question whether or not demons are simply evil. In service of that question, the show's devils have some oddities to them. The devils of the show do things that are generally evil, and sometimes they seem like little more than ravenous beasts, but, hashtag not all. Even the demons in this show are not a monolith. Despite being demons and earning the name almost every time, there are two instances of demons breaking from the mold and defying expectation. The first case of this seems like it's tailor-made to point out an oversimplified narrative. This one demon, I don't know if he has a name or not, but it seems like his only significant role within the narrative is to love, which of course is followed directly by Rio giving an oversimplified narrative saying that demons can't love. Which might even be true of most demons, but the idea here is that any broad narrative about a group of people will inevitably exclude some. In addition, there's one very small detail within the last two episodes which also supports this. Some demons blow up Rio's apartment, and then there's a throwaway line in the next episode saying that those were Xenon's men, and they were dissatisfied with something. It's a very small detail, but it's another division within the demons showing that they have some diversity even within this group that seems otherwise cohesive. The nature of demons gets more complicated though when you consider the gradations of devilishness that come with the Devilman, which you might say is the primary focus of the show. The most important thing about the Devilmen, at least thematically, is that they are quintessential examples of morally grey people. This moral greyness is communicated to us first by their physical makeup and that devils are generic representations of evil, but in spite of being part evil, they maintain their humanity, which is about the most literal representation of moral greyness that I've ever seen. Staying consistent, they secondly show their moral greyness with their actions. This is most clear in that scene with Miko where she tells Mickey that she both hates and loves her. Half of that is extremely negative while the other half is very positive. But the point is, it's complicated. People are neither evil nor good, and you can see this in all of the Devilmen because it's the point of their characters. If you didn't pay attention, you might think Akira is just the good guy. But good guys generally aren't rapists. I mean, sure, he was raping a demon and she probably liked it, but he didn't get a clear and sober yes. I mean, even if you don't buy that as morally grey, there are other things to point to in his character. In general, he has a ravenous appetite for sex and violence. As for sex, he doesn't even trust himself. It looks like he fears that he might be a threat to Mickey in this scene, which is why he distances himself from her. On violence, it seems like he channels the urge toward a good cause, but the intentions aren't always pure. When he can't get sex, he just goes out and kills a bunch of demons to sate his urge or something. Were those demons doing evil things? Maybe, probably, but that's not what the show emphasizes. It's also worth noting that these demonic traits existed in the Devilmen before they merged with the demons. The big thing with Akira is lust, and the show drops a mention in the first episode of him watching porn in the living room, which after he's merged with the demon, evolves into him watching porn in the school auditorium. The demon merely amplified some traits that already existed within him, and it's the same for Miko. Her feelings about Mickey didn't change, they just got amplified. Again, the line between devil and man is getting blurred. Marching on, this story further blurs the line between devil and man by the fact that the demons of this story require a host. There are two common depictions of demons, and the major difference between the two is that one has its own body, while the other acts solely through demonic possession. You could say that this show hits a weird middle ground between the two because the demons have their own distinct bodies after they've taken over a host, but honestly I think that's just to make the fights cooler. Anyway, the important detail with demonic possession is that demons can only act when their actions are facilitated by weakness in the human will, which coincidentally is the same condition for humans doing evil in the real world. The fact that devils need men to do anything truncates the distance between the two, and urges self-examination. Of course, the show concludes the implosion of the Venn diagram between devil and man in the 9th episode, where social hysteria reaches its peak, and devil and man become indistinguishable by actions alone. Akira sees this and states, "You guys are the ones who are demons." And we're all shocked. Oh wow, humans can have a demonic side to them. In the right circumstances, they can turn downright genocidal. I didn't see that before the show lost all subtlety. Thanks, show. I shouldn't be so critical. It was a cool scene, right? And it was good for his character arc, so whatever. All of these factors that I've listed, demonic possession, devilmen, non-monolithic demons, and humans acting like demons, they all go toward one very important question. Assuming that people are right in defining devils as evil, the problem comes in determining who is devilish enough. You see, much like autism, evil is a spectrum, and if we decide that we must eradicate evil, that will mean killing every living human being, because we're all on the spectrum. And even if that's not entirely true, it's best to be safe when dealing with a communist. Which no evil person. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. That's because most people think that they're mostly good, and they probably are. But under a warped enough lens, anyone can look like a demon, especially if you don't really know what a demon is. This might be a bit of a tangent, but it's sort of related, and besides, it's interesting. The first thing that caught my eye in this show was the source of Akira's power. He is to fight demons, but in order to do that, he must first become one. It's very common for the hero of a story's power to have some link to darkness. If you need examples, there's the One True Ring, which brings powers to those who hold it, but slowly degrades them. The thing that makes Harry Potter special is that he is marked by Voldemort, and in the process of marking him, Voldemort quite literally became a part of him. Batman wears a cape, but he must also wear a cowl, because in order to fight crime, he has become a criminal. The examples go on. This idea certainly can't be called original, because it's the opposite of original. It's archetypal. Archetypal ideas have been repeated ad nauseum throughout human history because they speak so directly to the human soul. So what is it about this archetype that speaks to us? Well, I think there are two aspects of it. First, there is a necessary dirtiness that comes along with fixing problems. When you experience evil, you can no longer deny its existence, and that tends to foster some bitterness. But overcoming darkness of some description tends to have a second effect. It equips you to deal with more adversity in the future. The ones who are best equipped to fight darkness are those who are well acquainted with it. Where this gets interesting is how the specific context of this story builds on these ideas. Within this story's context, the hero being linked to the evil in question says that not only will eradicating evil mean killing a lot of innocent people, it will mean killing our best people. Because anyone who's worth a damn has been through some shit. It's part of the process of developing into the hero. And taken on a smaller scale, it's part of the process of becoming an adult. As you grow, you will begin to recognize the evil in the world. Maybe that recognition is forced on you by tragedy, or hell, maybe you just watch the news. They're always eager to dish up a dose of tragedy. Regardless of how you come across the grotesqueries of a world, though, the recognition of them will change you. Probably for the worse at first, because despite the growth that these destabilizing forces allow for, they're also destructive. And in the process of maturing, you are going to get a lot of things wrong before you get them right. And even then, you won't be right about everything. It seems to me that there are two options. Either you'll be incredibly dull, or you'll be at least a little bit fucked up. And if we hold that small amount of fucked upness against people, we will have a lot less interesting people. People need the freedom to be wrong, and maybe even a little bit demonic, or they will never have the chance to mature. Because, as Christopher Hitchens put it, the only unforgivable sin is to be boring. Now to be clear, I'm pretty sure I'm thinking into this more than the people who wrote the story. And to be clear, I don't care. I enjoy overanalyzing things, look at the title. Alright, let's get back more directly on topic. Depending on your pick of historical context, the hysteria toward the end of the show takes on the character of a witch hunt, a Red Scare, or an Inquisition. I think the show portrays this sort of hysterical social purification as a matter of oversimplified narratives about a group of people who have been mostly misidentified as evil, leading to genocide. The show does a few things to set up the idea of complete and utter misidentification of evil before we get to the obvious example of it at the end of the show. First, there's the one flashback scene where some kids pick on Mickey because she's a foreigner. Then, Akira comes and defends her. So, in addition to building on the relationship between the two, this scene also points out that racism is a thing. And in a show that deals with genocide, racism holds a bit more significance than it otherwise might. The other example of misidentification of evil comes from the rapper kids. I actually think this is the main reason they're in the show. Beyond a few small roles they play in the plot, the only real significant thing they do is experience the effects of prejudice. The first time Mickey and Akira come across them, they identify them by stereotype. They look like a bunch of hoodlum criminals, and until our main characters get to know them better, they just see them as threatening. The place where this stereotyping seems more significant is where this cop horribly mishandles this confrontation with them. The rapper kids are pretty benign, but the cop seems afraid that they might try to shoot him. He misjudged them. It's as simple as that. And he also needs some training in how to deal with a possibly armed suspect. But regardless, these instances of misidentification help to add a layer onto the show's message saying that people are pretty bad at deciding what evil looks like. And in the event that they are actually trying to eradicate something that is evil, they are very bad at identifying people who actually fall into the category that they're after. That's why these overzealous ideas of social purification always kill innocence. One of the best things that this show did was blurring the line between devil and man so that devils weren't a simple enemy. To reach a little bit, I think there's an argument the devils were that ambiguous concept of what's wrong with humanity as defined by everyone and their brother. The fact that demons are vague and complicated and that people have trouble defining what a demon is contributes to an idea that we should exercise caution when attempting to excise society's demons. Sadly, the last act did some work to undermine this idea. I'm going to start criticizing the show now. In looking over what I've written, some of this could come across as a little bit harsh, but I'll try to be diplomatic about this because I really do like this show. It's only worth criticizing because it does so much right. I'll start with the quickest and easiest point where the show undermines its ideas. I take issue with the bit of exposition in the final episode where they explain what the demons are. First things first, this scene feels oddly shoehorned into the show. The show focused on the lives and choices of a small group of characters within a broader societal context. This isn't some grand Tolkien-esque narrative, so the sudden urge for world building feels jarring, and that's only amplified by its placement at the end of the series, because starting world building at the very end of a story is never a good idea. Now, sure, there's probably some exceptions to that. If the world building recontextualized the entire series in an interesting and real thought-provoking way, that might be good. But that just isn't the case here. Just think about what we learned. Devils are the disembodied souls of dinosaurs. Okay, might just be my opinion, but that's boring. That's boring and out of place. But that isn't the biggest issue here. The bigger problem is how it interacts with the show's themes. As I've said, one of the best things that this show did was collapsing the distinction between devil and man. But in portraying devils as distinct entities from man who had nothing to do with humanity, this depiction of demons builds a wall between devil and man. There is a bit more to my objection than that, though. When Rio came to Earth, he liked the demons' simple, straightforward hearts. The devils lived in a simplistic, predatory fashion in which the strong survived. Everything about this depiction of devils is simple, whereas everything about their depiction up to this point had primarily functioned to make them more complex. Outside of that, the other big problem that I have with this show is just Rio. Rio is the source of just about all of this show's problems, or at least he is at the center of them all. Firstly, the relationship between Akira and Rio makes no sense. When the first thing that our protagonist, who is defined by his empathy, sees of Rio is him ruthlessly stabbing a bunch of innocent people, I'd expect him to feel some empathy for the guy bleeding out on the dance floor. The relationship should have been a non-starter. But Akira seems to have an inexplicable blind spot for Rio. It seems possible that the relationship they developed as children could have given Akira this blind spot, but I think the amount of headcanon necessary for a story to make sense is a good measure of lazy writing. Rio's place in this relationship contributes to its implausibility as well. Rio was established as a prodigy. He has earned a doctorate by the time he is a teenager. He is simply a genius. And yet, it never crosses his mind that his plan could only lead to humanity's destruction. The problem here is that Rio has no motivations for any of his actions. He lacks any moral center to motivate him into trying to save humanity from the demons, and his actions don't align with a more selfish, pragmatic goal of preserving a society that allows for his lifestyle. So before he's Satan, he has no motivation to do anything. And yet, the things that he does are quite extreme. They'd require some justification. The show of course handwaves this by saying that he is subconsciously working toward humanity's downfall the entire time. But I have trouble buying that because he shows no sign of cognitive dissonance at any point in the show. The fact that Rio is supposed to be a genius and doesn't recognize that his plan is stupid on any level strains credulity. Now, I generally don't need stories to make that much sense as long as they have some interesting ideas, so the main character's actions not aligning with their established traits isn't really that big a deal for me. Yeah, it's only in the absence of interesting ideas where I start picking apart the economics of Spies and Wolf or something. Anyway, the problem here is that the inconsistencies in characterization stretched even my suspension of disbelief, so I suspect this could break the show for some people. But now we come to what I see as the biggest problem in this story. The way Rio's positioning as Satan undermines the themes that had previously been established. Looking at the portrayal of demons and such, one of the main things that I think you can glean from this show is that whatever group you define as evil and opposes the source of society's problems, you're probably wrong. The show's got a very broadly anti-tribalist message. Maybe I'm stretching things a little bit to get to that point, but fuck off, stretching's good for you, it helps with blood flow. Anyway, regardless of what the actual idea is that this show develops by collapsing the line between devil and man, they certainly undermine those ideas by positioning Rio as the big bad guy and then turning him into literally Satan. The show had done a lot of work to internalize evil to man and say that the whole thing is very complicated and mixed up within us. The idea of internalizing evil in that way is that there is no grand evil that will destroy humanity. Only humanity can destroy humanity, and we'll probably do that by calling each other demons. So when the final episode of this show features Satan himself leading an army of demons against humanity, can you really blame me for checking to make sure that I'm watching the same show? This is not the way to use Satan in a story. I mean, it's a creative medium, you can do whatever the fuck you want, but I'll always be here to criticize and talk about the things that have generally worked. In the stories that feature him, Satan is hardly ever responsible for the evil that exists. No, Satan deals in temptation. He doesn't hold power himself, he merely gives people what they already want. And there's a reason for that. It's a much more powerful message to say that evil does not come from some grand being beyond us. It's not even partitioned off into some evil group of people. If only it were all so simple. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? I'll try not to use that quote in every video I make, but it's a little bit too relevant here. Having the show conclude with a battle against a condensed evil is a childish way of conceptualizing evil, and it undercuts some of the show's main ideas. The second thing that would need to change to preserve the show's themes is the entire last episode. Yeah, I said that much wouldn't need to change. Does this qualify as much? It's just that the last episode is so bad. Like, don't get me wrong, it's actually some fantastic television. It's just that it doesn't work within the context of everything else the show's already done. So here's some broad ideas, sort of a replotting of the show's ending. So Akira thinks Ryo is the problem. He's been whispering poison into Trump's ear and... What? Okay, fine, it doesn't need to be Trump. He can be off making America great again. Anyway, Ryo's been whispering poison into the ear of some indefinite world leaders to be decided by the showmakers, and Akira confronts him. The two of them fight, maybe it's a cool fight, whatever, but Akira wins. He kills Ryo, and maybe it's a sad moment, but it had to be done. He was dragging humanity down to a dark place, and anyway, he's gone now. The day's saved, humanity can start to rebuild. Except nope, humanity's too far gone, society consumes itself, and people start nuking each other, sending humanity back to the Stone Age. There, that's my vague, replotted ending that would fix a lot of the show's broad issues in my estimation. It wouldn't fix everything. Ryo would still be an amorphous blob of psychopathic bullshit, but that particular issue would take a lot more work to fix. Now there's certainly more to be said on this show, especially on the last episode. There's a lot of ideas that they sort of montage through in the last episode, and they're not bad in themselves, but I think they're hurt by the way they're sort of shoehorned into the last episode. It just felt like they were throwing a bunch of uncooked spaghetti at the wall, and none of it stuck. I'm not going to elaborate on that. I really need to stop now because I feel like I'm starting to lose my voice, so I'll just say a few things in summation. This show is really good. I get why people are raving about it, but for me it's about a 7 out of 10. Now, that's a subjective opinion. I understand how people would go up to 8s and 9s, although I would have to question if people giving the show a perfect score were paying attention. As I pointed out, the show's got some major issues. To think that the show is perfect, you would have to put zero weight on coherent story and characters, which, fair enough, some people do. Or maybe you just disagree with me and I said a bunch of really stupid things in this video. But whatever, there's my opinion, take it or leave it.